First off, I want to just take super. Well, thank you all so much, panelists, for coming and attending the event today and frankly, giving your time. My name is Brad Garson from Quanta Networks. I'm the co-chair for the CTO Innovation Circle for the ACG, for the Association for Corporate Growth. And I'm going to have each of the panelists go around and just briefly introduce themselves. And the purpose of today is really to talk about Metaverse 2 and the business and economic impacts, and really to kind of see and get perspective of the people on the call that range from startups to branding to venture capital to large tech, to really see kind of everybody's perspective and kind of where we see things going, and especially in the kind of current turbulent economy and where things are going to go. So Matt, you're on the far left, so I'll have you, just kind of start out with a quick introduction.
Sounds great, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. So by way of introduction, it's great to be here physically with you two, but also virtually with people on the other end. So my name is Matt Hughes. I work for Microsoft and I lead our US high-tech industry. What is that? It's really high-tech software platforms. And as Brad said, huge opportunity in the venture capital and private equity space. And candidly, we've seen a shift over the turbulent markets that Brad talks about, moving from, sheltering a little bit away from the public markets into the private markets and private equity. So I'm excited to be here today, and we can take it in any direction you want, and as well as our guests here. But certainly, there's top of mind things when it comes to tech, security, data, AI, privacy. But I think part of the mission here is to talk about Metaverse. So I welcome the opportunity. Thanks for having me.
Super. Thank you so much for coming. Ali, you want to jump in next?
Sure. Ollie Jones, VP of Partnerships at Palm NFT Studio. Palm is a few things. It's an NFT platform that's a sidechain to Ethereum. We have a bunch of projects being built on it, but we also have our own studio where we do soup to nuts on projects with some brands like Warner and a bunch of things in the digital art space with people like Damien Hirst. And we also work and collaborate with a lot of sort of I would say blockchain agnostic tools, and vet and speak to a lot of companies that are building that perhaps don't have their own blockchain, but are hugely innovative in the Metaverse and Web3 space, and help assemble those for brands so that they can deliver projects. And it's how I've come across some of the people on the panel here, and it's one of the most exciting parts of the job.
Super, thank you. And Tamara, you're next on the slide.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for including Metabrands and myself in this panel. So a little bit about Metabrands. Started Metabrands about 2 years ago as an extension of what was a licensing and brand partnership, brand management agency, which has been around for about 12 years. And what we do at Metabrands is we help bring brands into the metaverse, very broadly defining metaverses in any immersive world where people can interact. And we do that via events, whether it's concerts or fashion shows or even sales meetings, to gaming. We're doing a lot now in Roblox and Fortnite Creative, Decentraland, and we also do NFTs, and we're doing a lot more, very specific metaverse marketing for our partners as well, to make sure that whatever we're helping them build, people know about and they can get to, and it's successful. So that's a bit about Metabrands, and again, happy to be here. We help brands figure everything out from strategy through execution.
Super. Thank you so much for a quick overview. And Mika, why don't you give a quick flyby and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm with Gumi Cryptos Capital. We are a blockchain-only investment fund. We led the strategic seed stage round into OpenSea, also seed stage, Yield Guild Gaming. We definitely have a lot of excitement around blockchain and the metaverse, but we do belong to a fund family. So Gumi Cryptos is now on our $100 million fund too. So there's 2 blockchain funds, but also this family of fund includes 3 gaming venture capital funds, as well as 1 pure play, basically VR, XR, AR type of fund as well. So I think we do have some metaversal DNA, and I think that's why I guess I'm here. So thank you.
Of course. So first off, thank you again, all of you guys, for coming to attend. And, as I look at kind of what's happening in the economy, and the first Metaverse event we did ended up becoming an NFT fundraiser for Ukraine. And we were just very quick to scale up to really meeting the need of one of the panelists. And we were able to talk about what was happening in Metaverse 1 and just generally what is it. But I really, kind of want to start out with, and maybe Miko, you could kind of lead us off with, kind of what you're seeing in some of the evolution you've seen that kind of brings us to where we are today with respect to the kind of business and economic impact. And then, with these times of change and turbulence, obviously we all know that this is when, big companies are formed, right? Or, good opportunities are formed and extraordinary investments are made. So why don't you lead us off with some of your insights in terms of, what we can kind of expect, or, well, expect is probably the wrong word, but anticipate, shall we say?
Sure, absolutely happy to do so. So we deployed our Fund One into the so-called crypto winter following 2018. So, we really do have a lot of excitement to further deploy our Fund Two into this bearish sentiment. So, we do know that bearish sentiment is good for builders. So there's a lot of talent that's in the market, a lot of, really great people kind of jumping in on Web3, Metaverse, blockchain. I think from the perspective of reasoning about the different technology layers, right? The thing that I think is so important to understand about the ultimate economic impact is really related to why. Right. So I've been really talking about this at NFT NYC, other venues, about like why Metaverse. And I think so far, if you look at the VR technology, the answer has been because it's new and kind of neat, right? That's the why, right? Which I think isn't that sufficient. I think the gaming segment explains why is because it's fun, right? So that's another why, but I don't think that's a particularly deep why either, right? I think that the blockchain introduces ownership and belonging, right? So in a sense, like you belong to tribes, you belong to a family, you belong to your friends, right? And obviously things belong to you. So it's your land, it's your items, it's your avatar, it's your customization, right? So like, this idea of creating sort of a sense of belonging, I think is really sort of gives you much more of a why, right? So, I think that's kind of my hot take on the metaverse.
Yep, makes complete and total sense. Ali, I know you're just kind of getting things going with your company. Well, you guys have been around for a little while, but you're just kind of moving in the space and really focused. So can you share a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing, kind of have seen, and then kind of, where you guys see things are kind of going?
Yeah, I mean, 90% plus of the companies we deal with are not crypto native. So they're looking at this space from often having an existing community. To build on what Nico was saying, there's a lot of people wanting to get involved in the metaverse space because they want to do something in the metaverse. And consumers, that's an interesting short-term draw, I think. But I think when it will start becoming even more effective for some of these brands that we deal with is when people are going there for a very specific experience that they want. It's like the first thing nightclubs are invented. You're like, oh, I'm going because it's a nightclub. And over a while, people are like, well, I'm going to the nightclub because someone's playing there, or there's something very specific happening there that I'm going for, not just because it's a nightclub. And we're starting to see already the percentage of people, which is still very low, that are going for something specific, but increasing. And the more work that people like Tamara's team and these kind of people are doing to work with these brands, the more effective and growing that sort of like more engaged people that are not just going because it's the metaverse, but are going for a specific experience. That's what we're looking for as a signal.
Great, and frankly, that's a perfect segue. Tamara, give us some of your thoughts. Obviously, going to metaverse, I think a lot of companies have made some investments. I've seen your Nike and Adidas go and buy companies because they've created different types of products and solutions that they feel are good vehicles to be able to kind of express their brand. But what are your thoughts around branding and kind of getting in there? I mean, it feels almost beyond the Wild West because it feels like it's so broad, and it almost feels like it's hard for people to really clearly get their arms around. It's going to be a very difficult thing to do. But where do you begin from a branding perspective?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of interest in brands, in the metaverse, and they'll come and say, we want to do something in Decentraland, for example. And it's like, well, why? Because we want to sell more products. Well, that's not the place to go to sell a lot of products, because there aren't, hundreds of millions of people there as there are in, Web 2 based games now. So the first thing to do is to really, ask yourself or ask the brand, what their objectives are and match it up with the right thing. So there are a lot of companies that are investing and thinking about Web3, but not quite ready to go there in terms of what their objectives are, unless they're looking for PR or buzz or just kind of proof to the industry that they're on the forefront and like dipping their toe in the Web3 waters. But in terms of really making an impact with consumers on a broader scale, people are now defaulting more to Roblox and Fortnite Creative. Fortnite Creative is user-generated content, so really it's opening the doors for creators to build things to this huge audience. And then of course, NFTs, and as you mentioned, virtual products, a lot of consumer products brands, physical products brands are looking a lot in terms of what's happening in virtual products, because you have new players popping up every day. And if you think that virtual products are going to be taking a piece of the business away from physical products in order to protect their share, this is a market that they want to be in. And as Nike saw with Artifact, all of a sudden a company came out of nowhere and was immediately like the #1 virtual sneaker company. So they quickly gobbled them up, which was super smart, but it's been a real wake-up call for brands to be paying attention to the space, not only for marketing activations and branding opportunities, but also defensive in terms of protecting your brand in the space, and especially in terms of engaging with Gen Z and getting new consumers. We're seeing that a lot with more established brands that might have lost some of their relevancy. And the metaverse is a great way to tap into Gen Z, who are the first generation of gaming natives. They were born into a world with the internet. They were born into Webkins and Club Penguin that we could discuss were early versions of NFTs and metaverses. And this is where the younger generations that now have the purchasing power are going not just to play games and compete, but that's where they're hanging out. And it's where they're going to be shopping and working and going to concerts and everything. So this is a really important space that brands that want to be around for the next 20, 30, 50 years need to be paying attention and participating.
Yep, no, that makes complete and total sense. And Matt, I'm going to go to you. So from Microsoft's perspective, big tech, big company, been around for a long time. What's the corporate approach with respect to having a presence in the metaverse, and also being able to to Tamara's point, it's, these are, call it born digital, born native digital people. And then others, like kind of the rest of us, are also participating and learning more. But what kind of foundation can Microsoft set to kind of set, do you look to take a leadership role? Do you look to follow? And, what's your kind of perspective there?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Brett. So maybe what I can do is take a step back, because there may be some people on here that we need to level set in terms of what is the metaverse. And this could honestly go for 20 minutes and we don't have that kind of time. But I think if you just think on simplistic terms, right? Web 1, whether we call metaverse, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Web 1, if you think about Wikipedia, is just read only, right? Web 2 is I'm interacting, right? And that's just kind of the social. The Web 3, we could never really think about Web 2 when we were in Web 1. We could kind of wrap our head around it, but we couldn't figure out the experiences, the friendships, the social, media connections, the different connections we had with other people. But then it kind of got beyond the pale, and then we had trust issues, right? So I think as we look at Web 3 and the metaverse, we're going to take a pretty measured approach. I'll give you my sort of industry perspective. It's here. It's going to come here. And I'll, in full transparency, even being in tech, I was a little bit of a skeptic, healthy skeptic, because I'm always trying to think, a few steps ahead. But it did seem like the time with other platforms, maybe it was just a PR redirect, but then we saw all these companies fall into line. And I think what's going to happen is, I think in Web3, we're going to see trends around source identity be identified, because I think there's lessons from Web 2 that we need, and scar tissue that we need to implement, not within Microsoft. I'm saying globally as an industry, we need to do a better job of that. And I'll come to your point on Microsoft in just a minute. So, but they are very aligned. And so when you have source identity, you can do things better. And as some of the folks here, the blockchain, understanding who am I engaging with as a marketer? Am I engaging with bots, or am I actually engaging with Brad and Ashley and getting the desired outcomes? So I think both from, a crypto perspective, a industrial perspective, a B2B and B2C perspective, it's going to come here. The fully immersive 3D HoloLens, it may be hardware dependent in manufacturing, but it may not be. It may not be a hardware dependency there. We've thought about everything from contact lenses. Again, They read your heart rate. They can tell if you've been smoking. They can tell, not that I'm pointing at him, I'm just saying, they know too much about you. And
Am I smoking?
No, I mean, it's just a little bit invasive of privacy. So I think we're going to see some regulation come in around data and privacy. Let's go back to the original question that you asked. So Microsoft is going to, and I think Microsoft is very well aligned to where the industry is going. As a matter of fact, we did a keynote yesterday, got a full immersive experience. Some of these use cases are going to take a while for industries to adopt. And to Tamara's point, like it's a great marketing tool, right? And you don't necessarily have to connect to use cases. It's a great thing to sort of amplify your brand. But I think the first use case is going to be around training and education.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about how the metaverse is going to be populated with generative versus the hype stuff versus the reality, I think we're going to see the developers, we're going to invest in developers. We're going to make it easier for the developers and DevOps and the best ideas to come from our partners in our community. And I think that's true across the board. Microsoft's got a unique approach in terms of how we're going to do that. More on that in a couple, probably 6 or 8 weeks. But it was announced at Build. So I think we're going to be heavy into looking at Microsoft as a platform of trust, leveraging all of our clouds, working with our partner ecosystem, having a flywheel effect. But our position is we're probably, at least in the short term, as there was a lot of hype, we may actually define what we're going to do by what we're not going to do, right? So we may not, I mean, I saw some ridiculous articles. It's like, what is the sentence for murder in the metaverse? Crazy things like strip clubs. I mean, there's all these sort of extreme ends, and I think we want to steer clear of that and really find generative use cases that will really help our industry clouds, our industry partners. So, like I said, I could go on for a while, but our position is we're going to be heavily developer friendly. We're going to accelerate the use cases. First one's going to be industrial around digital twins, heavy. And then we'll be working very closely with our startups as well to, get their best and brightest ideas for it.
That's great.
So I'll pause there. But thanks for the question.
No, and a fantastic response. So as I circle on your thoughts, which I think were great, you set up a really nice foundation of, Web.1, Web.2, Web.3. And really, Miko, this is a question for you. So as we set up those underpinnings, right, to, how do we grow on the foundation? Because what we've seen happen is Web 1 kind of grew, and then obviously each development of web spawned the next. And sometimes it would go in the in quotes right direction versus the in quotes wrong direction, right? What's it there for? So what are the companies, like what are the technologies and companies that you're seeing from an investment perspective? How do you right and wrong? I don't even want to kind of bring that up, but kind of bringing the technology in the correct or appropriate direction to allow it to be an open and respectful place. And are technology companies looking at it that way, or is it really just a pure commercial focus?
Yeah, so I think one of the really amazing things that's already come out of this panel is kind of that, there's definitely a wide ranging and very disparate set of perspectives around something that I think is kind of, not to characterize us analogously as blind men, but the blind man and the elephant, right? Which is, in a sense, when you talk about technologies like HoloLens, and 3D and corporate training, like that's very, very ensconced in like the VR technologies. Obviously, Microsoft has tremendous, huge assets in things like gaming, right? Which I think is super impressive and, very interesting from a VR AR perspective, but also from just a pure metaverse perspective, right? Because I think Tamara was saying, oh, well, metaverse brands are getting exposure in Fortnite, so in a sense, like one of the things that's so interesting is that when people talk about the metaverse, they actually start talking about like very random, very different things, right? And so that's kind of one of the big conundrums, right? Which is that, is there even a metaverse? And there certainly seems to not be the metaverse, right? So I think, that's one of the major issues. One of the things that I think is super important from a builder perspective is really coming together in kind of foundational technologies. So, I think your comment about a platform and foundation is super interesting. We actually assert and think that blockchain technology is pretty hard to separate from the idea of an open metaverse, right? Which is we think that something like NFT represents the really first public permanent internet objects. I mean, I think Ollie could probably run with this ball, right? But for us, like we think the idea of object permanence and the idea of like an object first database for the internet is actually kind of novel, right? So we think that as platform technology for building an open metaverse, we think the idea of having sort of an open public object database with object permanence is a really great kind of nucleus for applications, right? So whether the applications be gaming, whether they include VR, AR technologies, whatever they include, we feel like the idea of ownership is so central to the why. It's like, why would we go to the metaverse? And it's like, well, we belong to things and things belong to us. So the sense of belonging becomes so important as to like, why are we even doing this, right? And I think the answers of because it's fun is a temporary answer. And I think because it's new is another very temporary answer, you know? So I think the long-term answer is because we belong there, because the groups we belong to are there, and because the things that belong to us are there, right? So those are the answers that are lasting. So that's the way I would look at platform.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And Ali, as we kind of look at some of these technology underpinnings, because it seems like, Web3 and the metaverse is about ownership to some extent, right? You create tech and you can own tech here, right? So, what are some of the underpinnings that you're seeing, as it relates to whether it's, NFT seems to be the current vehicle and probably a long lasting one and everything's pinned onto blockchain, but are there other things that you're seeing that are beginning to develop?
Yeah, and I just killed my video because for some reason your question didn't quite come through. The one of the things that I'm looking for is being able to describe use cases without specifically talking at the beginning about what NFTs and digital permanence of assets are. And for people to describe something that they want to do as joining a membership and the fact that they're a member and they were able then to get in early and get token gated access to a VIP event. And to conclude with the fact that this was only possible because of NFTs, rather than starting the use case with, okay,
Ali, are you still there?
an NFT is a non-fungible token, and going for the use case first.
Ali, you're still there? Can you hear us?
I can maybe make a little bit of a point on that. Well, I think the NFT world, first of all, Web3, in my personal opinion, Web3 and crypto don't necessarily have to go together. It's nicely packaged, but there's so much market pressure in terms of fiat, US globally. There's a lot of pressure on that. So I think crypto in general, we saw a little bit of a dip today, is going to be under pressure in the short term. Going back to source identity, it does provide a lot of security and lack of control or more control. Mm-hmm. On the point of NFT, and this is just like not a Microsoft position, but a personal passion of mine, is I see like industries like media and entertainment or artists that were, if I were to say, Brad, here's a Marriott napkin and I'm going to write my name on it and give it to you. Mm-hmm. And is that worth more than a napkin? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think anybody would pay for my signature, mm-hmm. right? It wouldn't be worth like a Picasso.
Right.
So I think that's the hype with NFTs. Yes. The flip side of that is I see certain industries, artists, and I'm sure, I could go on for many more examples, but I see the music industry having unique assets to digital rights management, mm-hmm. both unfortunately those that have passed and those that are still with us that sure. we love from our generation or our kids' generation, and they can monetize that. Mm-hmm. The problem is, when Napster came along and file sharing and then, the App Store and Google Play, they kind of wrote the rules. And mm-hmm. so I think NFTs, what's interesting about NFTs is if there may be a lot of hype there, but there's reality. I think if we can get that right to the use cases and get some of these artists as an example, get them enabled and educated on the technology, mm-hmm. they have potentially, in my opinion, a first mover advantage mm-hmm. in this because they don't have to go through the traditional channels that would take 30% off the top.
Right.
So anyway, I didn't mean to steal his thunder, but I know his audio was clipping a little bit.
Yep. No, it makes a lot of sense. And you also bring up another really great point, which is, the privacy aspect and the, and the security aspects, right? And how one gets authenticated in, and are you who you say you are? And now you're in this virtual world. I mean, we seem to have a challenging enough time with privacy. Now it's very much at the forefront, and with some of the moves that Apple made this year, it's really kind of changed the landscape of privacy. So from a branding perspective, I think that has a significant impact, because if somebody comes in with their brand, again, they need to make sure it's real and authenticated. And you also, I feel like we as consumers need to be felt as if we're being taken care of. And I feel like I want my brand to take care of me. How will that happen as we get into the metaverse, Tamara?
Yeah, so everyone definitely has a different definition of metaverse. And my definition, as I always caveat when I'm talking about the metaverse by saying an immersive world where people can interact, which is very broad, which does include Web 2. It does include gaming, like Fortnite and Roblox, as I mentioned before. But I kind of threw up in the chat, in addition to Web 1, 2, and 3, there's very strong interest now in what we're calling, or many are calling, 2.5. So what we've seen are, companies, especially those that want to sell product today and want to get in front of consumers today, aren't quite ready to take that leap into Web3, aren't quite ready to do NFTs that are, specifically tied to crypto, and you need a wallet, and, or it's a very expensive piece of art, or so forth. So there's been a ton of interest in terms of what we're calling Web 2.5. And there's probably a lot of things you can kind of throw into that bucket, but it's before really hitting that Web3 world. And what we're seeing is, for example, retailers. They're not ready necessarily to go fully into Web3 metaverse and Decentraland and wherever else where perhaps there aren't these safety rules and the brand isn't necessarily safe there. But instead, they want to get out of the 2D, here are the products on a list on a piece of paper, that feels very Web 1, actually. So there's been a lot of interest and new companies popping up that we've seen that are creating what we call brand verses, which are 3-dimensional interactive worlds where people can shop and play and so forth, but they're web-based. So they're accessible to a much broader audience, which is really, really important for brands right now who aren't necessarily just getting the PR buzz, but really at the end of the day, 9 out of 10 companies we're talking to still want to sell products. They're still wanting to monetize their investment in the metaverse relatively quickly. So that kind of brings an expanded view of what the metaverse can be and what it can entail. And it means going to where people are. And you're not going to see, that much in terms of, quicker turn monetization desires going into Web3 until the people are there. And they're coming, I have no doubt. But right now, that's where we're seeing a lot of the growth, is in this Web 2.5 world.
So what I'm hearing you say is some companies are not quite to Web3, some are. It's sort of generational. It's this digital born. Miko, tell us your kind of thoughts about this Web 2.5 and monetization. Obviously, some companies, everybody wants, U.S. companies, everybody wants to monetize everything, right? And as quickly as possible. Is that appropriate? Is it right? I mean, as we've seen with IoT and other types of technologies and digital twin, it starts out, it's all the buzz, it raises up, nobody really knows what it is or how to get there and what are the tools and how to make things happen. Things cool down, and then the tools and things start to get built and infrastructure starts to get built, and then value happens. So it feels like we're in that first kind of peak. So give us your thoughts about, Web 2.5, or I guess it's Web 1, and as it relates. Thank you.
Let me address that. So, first of all, I just want to say, it is great to kind of be working here on this panel with Tamara, who's like a really pragmatic practitioner of this, right? So it's someone who's making this real, today, right? Because today, the tech, as a builder and as a builder aligned investor, I can tell you the tech isn't ready, right? So doing it today it's amazing. And I think, this idea of 2.5, or, we've been joking around in the chat calling it 2.1, right? In a sense, these web experiences, contain kind of, I would call it almost like a campaign level metaverse, right? In the sense that it's almost like the metaverse for now, which is more kind of flavoring or kind of culture, right? So it's a cultural zeitgeist, right? But I think that the longer term idea of Web 2.5, Web 3, and kind of this fundamental infrastructure, I think it really does start to address privacy on a much more fundamental level. And what I think will happen in terms of the transformation of marketing, actually, Stani Kulichov, the founder of Aave, DeFi protocol, said something amazing the other day on Twitter, which was that in Web 3, marketing will disappear. Right. And I think it's a funny and aggressive thing to say. But what I think he's really saying is he's saying that people will take budgets that were earmarked for channel and largely directly give that to users. Right. One of the mechanisms we've been seeing in gaming is this so-called play to earn gaming. Right. And play to earn gaming, what happens is to me, the best way of reasoning about it is they're taking marketing budgets and then they're allocating them directly distributed to users to interact with the product directly, right? So in a sense, like this kind of direct acquisition and then word of mouth creates sort of a network effect. And then you can build your user base from there, right? So, obviously there's Ponzi-nomics associated with this type of an approach. So I think early winners like Axie Infinity, and now STEPN are even like maybe even bigger Ponzi's, right? And I think in the long term, sustainable economies come out of recognizable economic value rather than just paying for user acquisition to the users, right? But I think that we're going to move in the future towards a world that's less marketers in white lab coats asking, why are the users doing this? And it's going to be more people sitting at home in their sweatpants asking themselves, why would I do this? Right. So the decider becomes more of the user, and the user has to decide what's best for themselves. So that's the change, I think.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. I mean, do you see, anybody can jump in on this, do you guys see, real-time opportunities right now for, money making, or people to, how are people really kind of monetizing what's happening now? Tamara, you mentioned it's kind of Web 2.1, shall we say, where they're using older tech, pinning something on. It looks like the metaverse, but it's not exactly the metaverse, but it makes the end user feel good. So they're in there and they're doing things. But please, kind of chime in with, what are some of the, call it revenue opportunities now? And as we're doing this, we're migrating, we're kind of rolling up on the top of the hour, but I'm going to move us in the direction of getting everybody's recommendations. So let's begin that now by how are people monetizing it? And then we'll move into what people can do. So anybody can jump in here.
Yeah, I'll jump in first. So from a monetization standpoint, I think that, what we're seeing is there's a perception that a lot of people are making a lot of money in the metaverse right now, and they're not. Otherwise, please tell me where. So we're seeing companies making money, again, whether you want to call it metaverse or Web 2 or 0.1 or whatever, Roblox in terms of virtual purchases, selling product, whether it's a Travis Scott concert and selling millions of dollars of virtual product where you don't have to worry about supply chain issues and things like that. There's definitely money to be had in these instances. Also NFTs, when you have scarcity, creating value in that way. But again, we're seeing the real life use today of NFTs really more from a brand perspective as marketing vehicles, as using that technology for loyalty programs and other types of utility that aren't necessarily revenue generating, more marketing spend, so which hopefully will translate to sales in the end. But we're not seeing a lot of revenue being generated right from the top. There has been a lot more interest, as I mentioned before, in terms of taking websites and e-commerce to the next level. And that's where I think that we're also going to be seeing a lot of, potential monetization happening.
I was just going to add a couple of comments. A lot of this has been focused on the B2C environment. I'll share some insights in terms of what I've seen from the B2B perspective. And Tamara, I love your insights as well as the panels on this topic. What we're seeing at Microsoft is we're working with customers across different industries. And from a B2B perspective, from an employee experience, we're working with a high-tech company that delivers a lot of call center experiences. They have about 65,000 call center agents. Only 10% want to come back to the office. So you have a little bit of the FOMO thing happening. So from an employee engagement index, certain employees are feeling disenfranchised. The people that are in the office, to your point, are they sitting home in their sweatpants? Are they grinding it out like the rest of us? And so they built a platform, partnered with Microsoft, and started using avatars. This is like 2.000. They're like early on in the journey, right? But what they did is they took disparate employees and made them feel like they were physically within, striking distance, and they felt like they were in the same place. So psychologically and emotionally, it improved their employee engagement index. So that's one sort of internal B2B, and they want to translate that employee experience to their customers too. So that's the journey for one. There's a communications provider that deals with the hearing impaired and other disabilities, and they're using sort of their platform with Xbox from a gaming perspective to take people who may have a PhD for education but can't express themselves in certain ways.
Wow.
And so they may be, a janitor, right? Because they don't have the accessibility options. And so they're using gaming to help the 60% of the hearing impaired, which are unemployed, to try to get that that level up so they can be, functioning the way we all do.
Sure.
And then the last one, which Tamara, you'll probably appreciate this one, is same thing with Decentraland. We see probably another dozen different use cases that are emerging with probably 100 different customers. But we actually, one of the first calls we got was from a legal entity, and they said, "Hey, we just bought virtual real estate in Decentraland," and they're like, "Now what?" And we're like, "Okay." So it was great because this law firm dealt with a lot of legal, you would think, compliance, right? So like, why would they do that?
Right.
But their brands, they represented luxury brands, and so they're like, we need to do this. But it's like, well, what do we do? So from a marketing perspective, the impressions and the engagement were off the roof. In terms of, does that lead to intent to purchase, more loyalty or engagement? I still think we're trying to figure that out. So that's just a few examples in terms of how people are making money from different lines of business and how they're kind of working B2B, employee experience, and then also
It makes total sense. Ali, I know you've gone off camera, but can you give us some of your insight on, what you're seeing from, how things are being monetized now, and really, frankly, how companies can kind of set themselves up for this? It feels like it's foundation laying time, and building time. But what's your kind of perspective here?
Yeah,
If you can still hear.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I can. And in case I cut out, I've put something in chat, but it's exactly what we're seeing. It's foundational at the moment. It's super foundational. And people are laying the groundwork now so that they can establish relationships with their super fans that will end up resulting in token gated access to these great experiences. But when we get past fun and when we get past this is new, we'll get to those specific use cases, and people like Tamara's team are the ones that are going to help us get us there. So it's exciting to be laying the foundations with some brands that frankly are being pretty brave and pioneering by even setting up NFT communities now. Like, I give them kudos. It's great. But I think that, their opportunities will really come to fruition. I think about retail. I think about airlines. I think about lodging, hotel companies. Those opportunities will start coming to fruition in kind of 12 months' time.
Yep. No, that makes complete total sense. And I just want to do kind of a soft segue here into, where do people start? Like, if they're looking at this and it's this, this big thing, and is it, 2.0, 2.1, 3.0, like, we don't really exactly know where we are, but that's normal at this time. But where do people get started? Where should they make those initial investments? Is it in people? Is it, as Matt indicated, buying some real estate? From a branding perspective, do you just want to hang a shingle out? Where do people get started? Ollie, why don't you start us off there?
Yeah, while I've still got internet, right? So yeah, I think they need to start with something incremental with staff that are participating in this space. If you've got staff that are not already buying NFTs and are trying to talk about crypto wallets or how they work, and they're not doing it themselves, it's really hard to get anywhere. And unfortunately, I'm speaking with a lot of brands that that's the case. And you can tell when you're talking to them that they don't know what's going on as a user. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be a gamer, but like, I can tell if you've never used, MetaMask and you're talking to me about MetaMask, it's very clear. So it's really hard to get anywhere as a brand if you've not got people that are getting involved in the tools and it from a consumer experience. So I think brands, first of all, need to start there and getting people on core project teams that are passionate about giving this a go and about trying things. But then start incremental and don't put revenue in the KPIs. KPIs should be, what did you learn that you didn't think you were going to find out? And those are the sort of things that you need to be learning from your first NFT projects.
Yep, that makes sense. Miko, do you want to give a go at this and where people should get started, and just how do they build that foundation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely Ollie. I think said it well. To me, I think that playing is very important. I think playing is really sort of the first use case for any emerging technology, especially consumer technology, right? So, I think the idea of like getting a wallet, like seeing how it works, maybe buying an NFT, nothing expensive, right? Because play doesn't involve like breaking the bank, right? So, just do stuff that's amusing you, and see what happens, right? Obviously you have to play with amounts of money that you can afford to lose, because otherwise it's not playing, right? So like, to me, that's the part of it, that I think is pretty important, right? Because obviously you can buy an Oculus headset and experience VR and you can kind of play games, but like, that's all stuff that's, a lot of people know the most about, right? I think the stuff people know the least about is mostly in the blockchain arena. And, I think being familiar with it, I think is going to be valuable as you start to see almost this generational thesis starting to shape up, right? Where it's sort of an asset class that has a generational dimension to it. And I think, it's sort of, even people with gray hair like myself, should get in there and, and not try to stay out. Cause, I do think that the net economic impact of this, will definitely get into the trillions.
Yep, makes sense. Tamara, what are your kind of thoughts here? I mean, in terms of, people getting started, where do they begin, on the journey? I completely agree with people leaning in and starting and just, again, to your point, if you have some, money to lose, you get in, you play around, you see what's where, but from a branding perspective, more consumer centric. Tamara, what are your kind of thoughts of that beginning point and stage?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what Miko and Ollie said, the first thing I always talk to about brands is go play. You don't need money to go into Decentraland. Go run around, go see what other brands are doing. Know what others are doing in the space. If you want to talk NFTs, go set up a MetaMask wallet and then let's talk. Go try to buy an NFT. When I was first learning about NFTs, I created some NFTs just to kind of figure out the process and feel, what other people experiencing it are experiencing it. Because then we can have much smarter conversations when it comes to your objectives. I'll have chief marketing officers calling me saying, we need to do NFTs. And when I say why, they don't really have an answer, so it's very hard to be smart and strategic and, deliver on your KPIs when you're kind of, building something backwards. So learn, go play, go experience it firsthand, build your knowledge base, know what your objectives are, know what your investment parameters are also, because oftentimes, we'll get into conversations about building something. Well, do you want to build something for 3 weeks, or are you ready to continue to invest and continue to renew that so that you continue to get people coming back? So, there's also the question of short-term or long-term investment, knowing what your options are, what other brands are doing, and also just leaning into, not to self-promote, but leaning into experts that kind of know what's going on. This space is moving really quickly. It's incredibly fragmented. So if you want to build something in Roblox or you want to do an NFT program, there are 150 different companies between those two things that, are out there today. So really knowing who the best players are, who the right people are to work for, with you for, bringing that expertise and knowledge, because keeping up to speed in terms of everything that's going on is a full-time job in itself, is what I'm finding. So, we had a meeting today where we were looking at Roblox activations with a big brand, and they had asked us to put together like a good, better, best examples of case studies. And we did that last week, and we had 3 new ones to add into the better and best as of just this past week. So things are moving and changing really quickly. So a lot of it is about learning and doing.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point as well, which is, go and find those, call it subject matter experts, and they're, we are all subject matter experts because we can say the words and we can spell the words. Nobody is an expert yet because it's all so new, and it is that Wild West. But as that's happening, I think reaching out to companies and talking to a few different companies as your advisors and as your guides, it is definitely critically important. What are your thoughts on this, Matt, in terms of kind of what that trajectory looks like in terms of how people can prepare to enter?
Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of anxiety, like healthy anxiety, like inspiration, but trying to go back from the hype and reality. And one of my favorite quotes is, clarity is the antidote to anxiety. Marcus Buckingham, 1995.
Nice.
Kind of keeps you focused. But I don't think we have clarity yet, right? So in absence of clarity, I think that you need to have a center of excellence, whether for your family, for your work. I think, and you can't do it one for social, one for mobile. Like, it has to be a center of excellence. And this is where you ingest information, you look at, against your either personal, your business or your whatever role you hold in life, and be a really critical thinker, but be curious and try not to judge, but quickly flash test what's real and what's not. There's and also for some of the people that Tamara and others say we need to go buy an NFT. Like, I think instead of like taking that on, it's also an opportunity for us to give them a little bit of homework assignment in terms of, this is not new. I mean, VR has been around since 1984. In 1992, there was a book called Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. One of my favorites in terms of demography and looking at different generations and uptake of technology, Boomeronomics. I'm dating myself a little bit, but the study of demography takes a lot of the anxiety out of predictability. It doesn't really go in really touch on technology adoption, but it shows how supply and demand are fairly predictable based on birth rate over a period of time. And so talking about, what we learned from Web 1, Web 2, and back in 1992, like Neil Stephenson in Snow Crash, he predicted sort of two vectors. And I haven't completely finished the book, but I've done a bunch of excerpts. And that is, one is the physical, transformation with technology, but also the psychological one. So we have to be ready to absorb these technologies. And so for a lot of people that, all of a sudden they read a Metaverse white paper and they say, Brad, Tamara, Ollie, whatever, like, hey, let's go do this. You kind of have to understand the whole history of it. And then a lot of this is not new, number one. And two, a lot of these things like data portability and taking source identity, taking that back and actually charging social media platforms for your data. But you own it, that's going to take a while. That's going to take a while. But have that center of excellence and critical thinking. Don't have it spread throughout the organization because you'll end up confusing each other.
Yep.
And
No,
yourself.
that makes total sense. That makes total sense. Well, as we're rolling up on the top of the hour, just want to get some closing thoughts. I really appreciate everybody's time and insight. But just, what are some of the key takeaways? Ollie, let me start with you and have you kind of give us your thoughts of, what's here, what's now, and what should people be thinking about in the next, call it 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Ollie, are you still with us? Okay, we'll move over to Miko. What are your thoughts on some of the key takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that we've got quite a long builder runway to go. I think one of the key milestones will be probably seeing the Cambria headset. So I think we're all excited to see what Facebook will launch in the next gen headset. We're also excited to see what Apple will announce. Apple has alluded to their AR headset, so I think that's been leaked at the level of Tim Cook. So I think we are going to see new hardware, and I think that's going to probably be really helpful. I think it'll help catalyze further excitement about these experiences, right? Because I think right now, if you look at Oculus 2, it's heavy. It's not even that great of a visual experience, so I think we need to advance just at the base level of the experience, but I would say that, like, we are seeing kind of fully blown kind of transmedia universes that are gamer centric. And I think so the gamer culture is obviously becoming such a big issue and topic, so I think the dominance of gamer culture is something that we're seeing unfolding in front of our eyes. There's 3.7 billion gamers worldwide, and I think that's really kind of the sort of the on-ramp to this entire metaverse experience.
Makes sense. And yeah, so I think also, if it kind of gives us, some, deep in the gamer world to, take a step into that, because maybe that's the on-ramp, shall we say, to metaverse, whatever numbers we're going to put to it. It looks like Ali, it looks like you might be back. So the question was, what are your kind of closing thoughts as we kind of, move forward, and where people can, kind of get themselves prepared and make their, call it 6, 12-month, 18-month plan?
Yeah, connect with people that are building and learn from them, listen to them, build out your professional network in people that are in this space, and start incrementally small with projects, and don't expect, make learning things you didn't know before a key KPI, not revenue.
Super, that's great. And Tamara, what are your thoughts here in terms of what some of those next steps or those underpinnings should be?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo everything that was just said, but the one thing I would add too, that I always encourage folks when I'm talking to them is, let's not think of it necessarily as a product. When we think about the internet, for example, there was a technology there that was the World Wide Web or the information superhighway, and we could never really envision where it's taken us. And I feel like at the end of the day, what all this hubbub is about the metaverse isn't about something that necessarily exists today. It's about the underlying technology, and wherever that's going, we don't know, but to think about that technology and how it can be used for whatever your business goals are, whether it's consumer based or business to business, that's really what you should think about. Instead of saying, I need to do this, how can you use this new technology and these new technical advances in ways that are going to help you build your business, help you reach out to consumers, have consumers engage with your brand, whatever it is. So that's what I would say, is think about it on a bigger tech level.
All right, so it looks like we've had some comments. Anything, I think, Miko, it looks like you've been doing some monitoring there. Any comments you've seen that have popped up that we want to address, or any of those kind of call it closing thoughts? And Tamara, what I'm kind of hearing you say is, Metaverse 2, Web 3, it's a journey, it's a road trip, right? It's like, we're all just beginning with the vehicle is just starting down the road, and we're looking at some trees and some things as we're kind of going along. But back to you, Miko, any comments you're seeing that we want to kind of talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the comments regard sort of the on-ramps, right? So I think gaming, obvious. I think social media will be, I think, a big one. Ali mentioned super fans, which I think is super interesting. So super fans suggest that influencers will be super important as an on-ramp, right? So, so to me, I think influencers, gaming, like when you start to see how viral these types of instruments are and these mechanisms are, how strong the network effects are, how big the tribalism is. You see Yuga Labs at like a 4 billion valuation, after 1 year. So like it's really something where I think the best thing to try to understand this too is, I think Tamara was saying that the bigger companies may be moving a little slowly. And I think that this is a great opportunity for the venture business, because it's a disruptor business. It's really easy for smaller organizations to start minting. And we're already seeing in our pipeline AAA class games that are being published by upstarts that are kind of embracing this kind of NFT blockchain technologies. I think $4 billion of NFT sales were made by Axie Infinity. So that's not a small number. So, so we are at the starting gate, but, real economic impact is being felt already. I think Illuvium just did a $70 million land sale kind of into the teeth of this bear market. So like, it's a pretty, it's a good result. And I think, if a game company makes 70 million in revenue on digital assets in a single sale event, it's good. It's good news. So I think it's happening.
No, I agree. I think it's definitely a significant moment. Matt, what are your kind of thoughts in closing in terms of what the future is kind of looking like in the Microsoft perspective, or your personal perspective?
Yeah, I think we're going to, from a Microsoft perspective, I think it aligns to everything that we've shared on this call, is sort of step one, which we announced at Build, is we're going to enhance both a 2D and a 3D experience with Teams and Mesh. And so you will have that 2D, 3D avatar engagement, and we're doing a kind of a crawl, walk, run. And then over a period of time, that will be more enhanced, and we'll have obviously the HoloLens experience. And there's some really exciting things that are coming down the pike. But we're going to just try to improve the employee experience, the customer experience. Crawl, walk, run. Again, as somebody said, a big tech company out there, you got to be nimble too, and work with venture capitalists and be on the cutting edge. So we also have partnerships with M12, our division that funds startups, and then Microsoft for startups. So we're going to keep our finger on the pulse a lot more today versus in the past. And we're going to try to really focus on those new use cases. I would say that from a gaming perspective, you're going to see gaming come into, what was announced a couple, 2-3 weeks ago. Gaming is going to come into Teams. And I think for all the reasons that our family members either are gamers or not, gamification makes working fun to a certain extent. I was never a gamer when I grew up, I have to admit it. But I think there is a gaming aspect that drives engagement from a CMO perspective, which drives revenue. And so I think we're going to, again, crowdsource the type of gamifications. We're going to make, entering your sales information and your engagement with partners, we're going to make it a lot more fun. And then as you start to think about what's in front of the Department of Justice right now, the Activision Blizzard announcement. And so I think that, again, the developer ops, the new, app source models, and how we're going to drive innovation to that sort of phase 1, 2, and 3 approach that we announced at Build. So I think if you're looking from, okay, what's my experience? How's it going to change with Microsoft? I would look for Teams to sort of be the repository for all of those experiences, and they're being rolled out right now as we speak.
That's great. That's great. So you guys are really making the investments now and really looking at Teams as being the vehicle or the environment in which where people will go and share and participate.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's
absolutely.
Great.
But we also will be open sourced, right? And we'll work with partners and other players. So we're not gonna create a walled garden metaverse. We're going to be very open, and I think that's a little different than what some of our peers in healthy competition have announced.
Yep. No, that makes total sense. And I was thinking walled garden, and you said it, so I'm glad to hear that that's not the case. Well, we've rolled up on the top of the hour just to skosh over, but I wanted to thank all the panelists for joining and really appreciate your insights. There is a recording; it will be available on the ACG website, and let's definitely keep in touch. And likely we'll need to come all back together in about 12 to 18 months and revisit and say, well, were our predictions right or wrong, or what happened? But I think this is an ongoing dialogue, and it's early days and super exciting. So thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to ACG. Carol, thank you so much for making it happen. And everybody have a good July. And I thank you all. Take care.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.